Great. Thank you, Robin, very much for facilitating this today. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. I know that it's fairly early here in the morning here in Utah. It's 8:30 p.m. For Greg at the U.S. Embassy in New Delhi. So we're very grateful for Greg for joining us for a little after-hours work for him this evening, and for all of you for spending some time with us today. We've all come to learn more about India. It's clear that India is the 5th largest economy. By 2024, it will have the largest population in the world. And India has been, we've seen increasing volumes of trade between the United States and India for several years, amounting to, in 2018, $142 billion. And India, that is driven by over 7% GDP growth in India. India FDI to the U.S. is now amounting to $13.1 billion, and that's the number we'd like to see more of. We'd like to see some of that coming here to Utah. And so India is a very important trading partner. That was true before COVID, before the trade dispute between the United States and China. But what we've seen over the past couple of years is both the trade dispute and now COVID is accelerating a trend of U.S. Doing a relatively less business with China and more business with India. And so we want to focus in today and over the next few weeks to create more awareness about India for Utah companies, to give you opportunities to connect with experts on the ground in India that can help you think through how your business can engage with India to grow and to recover from COVID-19. You know, just taking a step back from India, here in Utah, we are very fortunate that we are making it through the pandemic relatively better than just about every other state in the country. That's due to a combination of good leadership and good policy and a lot of good fortune. But what that means is it puts our companies in a position to be thinking about the rest of the world right now. There is great disruption in global markets, and so we have great opportunity to go out there to understand what the market opportunities are, and then to lean on our network and our partners to go ahead and open doors and generate momentum for Utah companies. Speaking of partners, I want to be sure we thank all of our partners on this virtual trade mission to India, including the U.S. Commercial Service. Shelby Dyack is a phenomenal partner of ours. She's right here in Salt Lake City, Utah, and does great work. Again, I mentioned Greg. I'll introduce Greg here in a couple of minutes. Also, the U.S. India Business Council. They are with the U.S. Chamber in Washington, D.C. Sid and his team have been great partners to us, as well as World Trade Center in Mumbai, our partner organization there, and Denson Shira and Associates. And so just a quick reminder, today we're going to be hearing from the U.S. Embassy in New Delhi to get a market briefing and a market overview. On Wednesday, July 1st, we'll get the view from India, opportunities for partnership and collaboration. That session will be brought to us by World Trade Center Mumbai. They're lining up some great speakers, including the chief economist for IBM in India, government leaders, as well as other experts from the embassy team to talk a bit more about the political and economic situation there. And then on Wednesday, July 8th, we'll have a session brought to us by Denson Shira and Associates. They are a really phenomenal business service company with a presence all across Asia with really, really deep expertise. They're going to talk to us about India as a supply chain partner and an alternative to China. And so we will make sure in the chat section here, we'll post links where you can go ahead and register for these upcoming sessions. And so that by the time we finish this, we'll get the U.S. Embassy perspective, which we're going to get today. We're going to get Indian government and business leaders' perspective. And then we're going to get the perspective of a company whose sole existence is to help U.S. companies and companies from outside of Asia grow and expand their sales and their operations in Asia. And so that's going to be a very comprehensive look. You know, as we do this, we're doing this to raise awareness, again, to open doors, to generate momentum. But we really want to see companies taking concrete action as a result of participating in these virtual trade missions. And so we want to be prepared as you look at the opportunities, as you do your due diligence, please reach out so that we can make introductions, we can provide grant funding to help offset the costs of growing in India, and we can work with our partners, including the U.S. Commercial Service, to do some really phenomenal services, gold key services and other matchmaking services that can help you accelerate your growth in this part of the world. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our tag team partner in all things. Governor's Office of Economic Development is a partner with us on this event. Mr. Franz Kolb is the Director for Diplomacy and Protocol. For those that don't know Franz is a phenomenal asset to the state of Utah. He's been in this business for decades. If Utah had a Secretary of State, that would be Franz. And so, Franz, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you for a couple minutes so you can give your introduction, at which point we'll go ahead and jump in the program and turn it over to Greg so that we can benefit from his expertise. So, Franz, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Miles. I'm very grateful. Good morning to everyone in Utah as well as in India. I am grateful for the World Trade Center and their commitment to international trade. I've had the opportunity to travel to India many times and over the years and also help organize trade missions. The state of Utah is committed to international trade, and the World Trade Center is doing a good job. I'd just like to recognize a few people. We have some phenomenal folks in India and here in Utah that have built this bridge between Utah and India over the years. First off, my mentor, Dr. Ashok Joshi. We have also Dr. Dinesh Patel and Dr. Ragula Bhaskar, who have so diligently worked on our Utah-India relations. And we certainly need to mention Governor John Huntsman, who led a few trade missions to India and even adopted a daughter from the subcontinent. We are grateful for our friends in India and their commitment to and the many delegations that we've had over here. And we believe that India is an extremely important part of the world and has always been one of our major export destinations. It is our hope that this virtual trade mission will result in a trade mission where we will go over again and to the beautiful people. We have some great connections with various with various states in India, not only Maharashtra but many others, and so we are grateful for the cultures that exist. These family-oriented cultures in India as well as here in Utah. So there are many parallels, and India has all of those that have been over there made us a better people here. So we are grateful. We congratulate the World Trade Center Mumbai in this. I've also been there, and in this collaboration with the World Trade Center Utah. I also would like to, very grateful, express my appreciation to Shelby Dyke here in Utah, as well as the U.S. Foreign Commercial Service and the Embassy in New Delhi. So with this in mind, in behalf of the Governor's Office of Economic Development, we congratulate all of you. Now let's do some business, and I'm thankful for these opening words, and you can be assured that I will be back in India as soon as this COVID-19 thing passes. So with this in mind, again, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure welcoming each one of you to this exciting conference. Let's do some business.
Great. Thank you, Franz, very much for that. And also, I want to thank Courtney Ray with the World Trade Center Utah team for all the phenomenal work that she's done to line up this virtual trade mission. Okay, without further ado, go ahead and introduce Mr. Greg Tavs as Deputy Senior Commercial Officer at the U.S. Embassy in New Delhi. Greg heads up the day-to-day operations of the 7 offices comprising the second largest commercial service country footprint in the world. Mr. Tavs promotes the commercial interests of the United States in this market of over 1.3 billion people with his team of commercial officers and specialists. Before arriving in India, he served with distinction in postings in Mexico City, Istanbul, Lisbon, Seoul, and twice in Tokyo. Mr. Tavs was an international trade specialist in the Commercial Services U.S. Export Assistance Center in Los Angeles, California. Mr. Tavs started with the U.S. Department of Commerce's Bureau of Industry and Security, where he advised U.S. exporters on the Export Administration regulations, compliance, and U.S. export control policy. Mr. Tavs received a master's degree in business administration from California State University, a certificate in international business from the American Graduate School of International Management, Thunderbird, a Bachelor of Science degree in business from California State University, training in export licensing and regulations from the Office of Export Licensing, Washington, D.C., and a certificate in customs law and procedure from the Foreign Trade Association, Los Angeles. He has varying fluency in Japanese, Turkish, Portuguese, and Spanish. So as you can tell, Greg has deep expertise, and Greg, again, very grateful to you for sharing that with us today. So I'll go ahead and pass the baton over to you.
Thank you, Miles. And just start with my big thanks to you and Courtney and everybody else at the World Trade Center in Salt Lake City there. Also, thanks to France and those at the Economic Development Office in the state of Utah. So we really appreciate, I think we're all on the same page in wanting to get Utah companies successful in doing business overseas, and especially in India, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. So let's put India on the map. You know, we are on the other side of the world. Let me tell you a little bit about our footprint. He did mention, Miles mentioned that we are the second largest commercial service office in the world. We have 7 offices. Let me just go around clockwise from New Delhi and tell you about sort of the strengths and what you want to look for in each city. New Delhi is basically the seat of government. If you think about New Delhi as being the Washington, D.C. of India, that's pretty close. All the government business gets done in New Delhi. With a couple small exceptions, and I'll tell you about those in a second. Moving on to Calcutta. Calcutta was the former capital of India under the British. You may know it as Calcutta. These days it's called Kolkata. Then Hyderabad is in the center of the country. I think of all of our posts, Hyderabad is sort of the most up and coming with the most room to grow. It's sort of modeling itself on Bengaluru as a high-tech capital, but there's lots going on in Hyderabad. Chennai was formerly known as Madras, and it's on the coast in the south of India. It's known for the automotive industry, and lots of manufacturing. Moving on to Bengaluru, formerly known as Bangalore, is really the high-tech capital of India. There is so much going on there in ICT, services, business office, backroom office operations. It's quite the high-tech capital. And then Mumbai. Mumbai is really the financial center of India. It's also the entertainment capital. You can tell by the former name Bombay. It's the home of Bollywood. I did mention that there were a couple of central government activities that weren't in New Delhi, and one of those is the national bank. It's called the Reserve Bank of India, the RBI, and it's headquartered in Mumbai. Also, the nuclear regulator is also located in Mumbai and not New Delhi. So just keep that in mind if you're in that business. Moving on to Ahmedabad. Ahmedabad is a manufacturing capital. It's also the biggest state in terms of chemicals and oil processing, and it's also the capital of textiles in India. So it's quite an active state. You'll run into business people all over the world from Ahmedabad because it's a very business-oriented state. I do mention that we have partnership posts. Partnership posts is an interesting combination of the State Department, who has the State Department has far more posts than the commercial service. We are attached to embassies and consulates around the world, but not all of them. So only the countries where there really is considerable economic activity. So we work with the State Department to provide commercial services for American companies. So keep this in mind because our partnership posts are in Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. So if you have questions about those countries, doing business in those countries, we can help you get connected to the State Department people that offer our services in those countries. Okay, and you know, I can't thank Shelby enough for her part because in putting this together, we're really on the same team. You know, she's in Utah, I'm over here in Delhi, but we really have the same job and the same mission. And that is, you know, that is to bring American companies overseas and get them successful. And we have a range of services, in many cases, counseling and preliminary market research, market identification. There are no fees attached. When we devote our activity, our efforts specifically for you and your company, we're required to recuperate a small fee. So keep that in mind going forward. Some of our services, like the Gold Key service, we are required to charge a small fee. And I should also mention that because of the COVID situation, we have been authorized to waive those fees for small businesses. So if you haven't heard it yet from Shelby, you heard it from me. Start lining up at her office and asking for the free Gold Key services. I'm sure she'll appreciate that. But seriously, we're bending over backwards during this period to make sure that our services are available for companies that may be distressed. Let me also mention, it's not just the commercial service in our office here in New Delhi. We call them sister agencies. Two of these agencies are really part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. The Patent and Trademark Office has very few officers around the world. We do have one of them in our office. The Patent and Trademark Office handles IPR issues, intellectual property protection, and they can advise you on issues in all of those countries I mentioned in the region. And I'm sure you'll have those questions. So we have really the expert right here in our office. We also have the Bureau of Industry and Security, BIS. BIS handles export licensing from the United States. If you're exporting high technology products from the United States to the world, you may or may not have to apply for a license. And we have those people that can advise you whether you'll need to do that or not right here in our office. Let me also note that the other agency that's not part of the U.S. Department of Commerce is the, we call it USTDA, the U.S. Trade and Development Agency. It's a small agency. It's an independent agency. Their role is to start the process for projects that American companies can get a part of. So they will provide seed money for feasibility studies or reverse trade missions to the United States where experts from the host government, the Indian government, can visit facilities and learn about American technology and products. So they can be very helpful in starting projects which you can then bid on and win. Okay, moving on. Let me give you just a a brief overview of the political landscape in India. I won't go into it in great detail, but just to give you a taste, I think, you know, they say that the relations between the United States and India have never been better, and it's true. I think if you look at the history dating back to the beginning of the country in 1947, it was somewhat rocky. During the Cold War, India held us at arm's length, and they were the leader of the non-aligned movement, if you are familiar with that. However, there's a lot of things that are familiar here. Even though it's on the other side of the world, we're both democracies. It's a federal system here. It's a federal system. So there are states. There are 29 states and 7 union territories. Someone asked me what the difference is, and it's that the union territories were too small to actually become states when the country was formed. One of them is New Delhi, by the way. New Delhi is very similar to Washington, D.C. in that it's not really a state. It's a multi-party system. There are actually 2 main parties, the BJP and the Congress Party. So it's kind of familiar to the United States. But that said, I mean, there are some differences that maybe I should highlight. Indians don't like to see themselves as an ally of the United States. So if you're at a party and you mention, India and the United States are great allies, you'll find that the air suddenly gets frosty, and that they say no, we're not, and so they're very prickly about that. It's something to keep in mind. Also, the state system. You know, the states here are actually the state lines are drawn around languages, so it's more akin to the EU than it is to the United States in that regard. For example, Maharashtra, the state of Maharashtra, the state lines are sort of drawn around those people that speak Marathi. The same thing about Gujarat, where Ahmedabad is. The state line is basically where people speak Gujarati. And then it goes on, and you can tell there's a lot of languages here. And it's because there used to be a lot of individual principalities. So keep that in mind. The history here goes way back. The security relationship is actually getting better, I think, between the United States and India. We're not allies, but I would say we're partners, and relatively good ones at that. So we have a lot in common with China. And you saw this week that there was some activity on the border of China, and China is rather aggressive. India is in no position to start a war over this, but you can see that there's some tension. And also there's some security challenges with Pakistan as well. That goes back to it used to be the same country, Pakistan and India. It was only divided in 1947, and it was quite painful. Let me look at the economic overview. Let me take you, Miles already mentioned it's the 5th largest economy in the world, GDP of $2.9 trillion. The middle class is actually a small percentage of Indians, but that small percentage adds up to more people than there are in the United States. So the scale here is enormous, with 1.3 billion people. Now, the COVID situation is going to take a toll, as it is in lots of countries. We're kind of bracing for that in 2020 and beyond. with the 2019 facts, of course, it was the 12th largest U.S. export market, and total two-way trade was $149 billion. We run a sort of persistent small trade deficit with India. And you're probably curious about the COVID situation here. India sort of entered into it much later than the United States did, or some of the other countries. For a long time, into early April, there weren't many cases here. But of course, India is quite a crowded country, and the cases are still increasing very rapidly daily here. So it's going to be one of the countries that comes out of it maybe later than a lot of other countries, including the United States. When this first happened, there was a lot of there were a lot of problems with companies that had operations in India, and their supply chain were having problems, and we engaged with local authorities here to open facilities, get key people back to the factories, things like that, and we were able to solve a lot of issues for a lot of medicines and ventilators and things like that. So we've actually been busy since the shutdown happened. And let me just say that USAID is doing sort of the U.S. part to help the local situation. They're funding programs to combat COVID-19 and help the poor and vulnerable population. We also donated ventilators to India. There are high-level bilateral engagements with India that we don't have with every country. For example, the U.S.-India Commercial Dialogue and CEO Forum. Both have been rather effective in introducing things that irritants on both sides that can be dealt with by the government. And we've actually had quite a few successes that way. So this isn't sort of going in and hammering on things that they should do. It's the CEOs get together and say, this is something that would help us both. And that seems to resonate in the governments, and they're able to get things done. USTR has the Trade Policy Forum. There's a high-level working group on IPR. On the security side, there's a 2+2 ministerial dialogue that discusses issues in the region. And then the Department of Energy has the Strategic Energy Partnership Dialogue. There are some minor dialogues that go on as well in ICT, cybersecurity, commercial space, and other bilats. So now we get into the fun part for companies. We've identified strategic sectors that we think U.S. companies have a clear edge, and there are great opportunities. Now, of course, the COVID situation leaves everything with a bit of a question mark. We can only guess when things will normalize, and maybe we'll get back to normal. So we're sort of dealing with a work in progress on these. So first, let's talk about aerospace. Aerospace is probably our #1 area where U.S. companies have a clear and growing market. $16 billion in aerospace overall. It's the number 9 market in the world. The growth rate was phenomenal, and I say that before the COVID situation. They are building airports like crazy. They've, if you ask anyone about what is an airport that's being built in the United States, nobody has an answer because there aren't any. But in India, they've got like 100 airports on the books, and several of them have several greenfield airports have already started, and these are huge projects. And each one of those airports needs, a lot of products and services from the United States, including security scanners, security equipment, radars, air traffic management, et cetera. And then those of you involved in the MRO industry, maintenance and overhaul for aircraft, India is looking to build capacity in this area, and they need partnership with American companies, and they need American products to do that. Moving on to defense, which is, we keep it separate from aerospace and defense. It's number 5 in overall military spending in the world. Now, just harking back to that non-aligned movement, India has in the past seemed to have purchased one weapon system from Russia and one weapon system from the United States, and you can actually see this in some of the military bases side by side, and it's quite interesting. But we have had our share of successes recently, and you can see them there. And these are no small sales. They prefer the United States equipment. They just don't want to get too close in a military sense. Moving on to information communications technology, ICT. India is, and I probably don't have to mention this, but as a service provider and a backroom deliverer of services, India is huge. They provide 190 billion in IT services in that sector. And while they're providing the services, we're providing the equipment and the software to make that happen. So it's actually a very symbiotic relationship. Mobile is the key right now in India. 1.3 billion people, and a GDP, and the average GDP, per person is about $2,000 a year. But I can guarantee you that most of those people, their first purchase is going to be a smartphone, because it's so important now. Wireless connectivity is basically everywhere in India, and that means everything regarding wireless connectivity, including the software and apps and handsets and transmitters, all is growing and needed in India. Let me give a plug for our cyber trade mission to India in 2021. We hope that we can do that in person. By April, we hope everything's okay for travel. The cybersecurity market is expected to grow by over $3 billion by 2022. They need everything in this regard, and it's going to be huge. And then, $2.6 billion in computer and electronic equipment. from the United States in 2019. Gives you an indication of this sector. This is going back to how important mobile is. Digital payments expected to reach 135 billion by 2023. E-commerce is everywhere, and the COVID situation is only accelerating it. And financial services that are mobile are in demand. Okay, let's talk about energy. The government has a $225 billion power generation, distribution, and transmission plan. They want to roll out 250 million smart meters by 2023. Natural gas, which is pretty minimal right now, they want to bump that up to 15% of the energy mix by 2022. City gas distribution and piping it to the user in the cities, it's happening everywhere, and I see it in Delhi daily, actually. They're actually burying the lines, and it's coming up as a bright yellow pipe in the backs of people's houses. And then they're looking to increase ethanol, the ethanol mix in gasoline. Coal is huge here. And I mentioned that Calcutta is the sort of the capital of the mining center. It's the mining center in India. So if you're exporting mining equipment or anything in that area, Calcutta is the place that you need to be. They're looking to privatize coal mines. That is sort of an issue. Any kind of privatization in India is hard won. There are a lot of labor issues here in that regard. And then refinery modernization and commercialization of residuals. Now, environmental technologies are big here because I can tell you they need absolutely everything in this regard. So it's a $23.2 billion market. The growth rates are 10% over the last decade every year. You can see the headlines that the air quality in India, most of the big cities are way over the safe level for air quality. They want to try to get a handle on that. You're sort of at the action level right now in the government trying to find out what they can do. So other countries have, if you think about Los Angeles in the 1960s, that's India right now. So, and then everything in the environmental area, air, water, all kinds of water projects, whether it be drinking water or wastewater, any kind of solutions from the United States will have an edge here. Healthcare is a huge industry for U.S. companies in India. Everything from medicines, biologic medicines, devices, big devices, hospital software. If you go into a hospital in India, almost everything is made abroad. India is big in generic pharmaceuticals. They don't make a CRT machine here. They need to import it. So it's a huge market for U.S. companies. There are two systems here. There's a public healthcare system and a private healthcare system. They're both big buyers of U.S. products. With this COVID situation, cloud-based healthcare is going to be huge going forward. And there are a lot of up-and-coming specialty hospitals like cancer hospitals or pediatric hospitals, which didn't really exist before now. Okay, education, you know, the figures here on the slide are really from a very active last year. I think a lot of the activity is going to take a breather for a while. The commercial service is very active in promoting U.S. higher institutions, higher learning institutions. We can provide the range of services that we can for a manufacturing company, for a university. We can do a gold key for them. We can do, you know, matchmaking. We can do an event for a university. And India is a fertile ground for finding students, for finding those up-and-coming students that are willing to pay full price to come to American universities. And we anticipate that this sector will bounce back. Now, you're probably all wondering about the challenges. I did mention a few. I can say that if you're thinking about, you know, doing business overseas, India is probably not the first place you should think about. You should think about going to Mexico or Canada and selling your products there and getting your teeth cut there. India is, I would say it's one of the difficult markets. And here are a few reasons to think about it that way. There's lots of bureaucracy and red tape. The example I like to give is when I moved to India, I brought my pet cat, and some bureaucrat in India had to not object to our cat being in India. It's called a non-objection certificate, and it's brilliant because it keeps the bureaucracy in business forever. All they have to do is not object to things. And believe me, this non-objection certificate is widespread in every part of a business that you could actually do here. So I did get my cat in, by the way. So the regulations go on and on. I think there's a strong central government, but also just like the United States, the federal system, the states have their own regulations, and so do the cities. And there are even sort of neighborhood regulations. Corruption, I would say, is not as big as it used to be. A lot of government services have gone online. And the main example of this I like to give is with the ports. Getting your products unloaded and through customs used to be a very paper-intensive process. And a lot of people would not have to object. And so everybody would have their hand out saying, if you want this paper processed expeditiously, maybe you'll have to pay a little bit. So that kind of thing went on in a lot of corners of government in India. And now it's basically an online process like it is in a lot of countries. And the whole middle person was cut out. And so the opportunity for, asking for payouts. So I would say it's not as bad as it used to be. The thing that impacts American companies is that this will slow down a process. And sometimes companies have to call me to ask me to weigh in and shine a light on the process and say, why is this taking so long? Can this be moved along? Is there a problem here? And sometimes that works to move things along. Price controls have been in the news. If the government is involved in buying something, they may, and this is sort of well known in the healthcare industry with stents and knee replacements. The government will actually tell you what they're going to pay you for it, and there's no negotiation. Contract enforcement is an issue, as well as local content requirements are sort of ascendant. There's a movement to protect Indian manufacturers against big multinationals, and that sort of results in the government asking you to move your factory to India, and then you can you'll have more privileges, etc. And then, of course, there's IPR issues I mentioned before, and some FDI limits. So there were a round of economic reforms at the beginning of the Modi administration. We were very hopeful that that would continue. They didn't really. Sort of when Prime Minister Modi got his second administration, it stopped. In fact, there were some steps backwards on protectionism and things like that. With COVID, they did announce $260 billion stimulus package, like other countries have done. They view the U.S. problems with China as with hope that a lot of those companies will leave China and come to India. So, but they haven't really done the corollary, making the investment climate attractive. So that's kind of missing at this point. And the calls for protectionism are loud, and they're being heard because they're local. Now there are some drags on the economy. You'll hear about them. Their land and labor laws are outdated. There are infrastructure issues. Getting your things from the port to the city is always an issue. Non-performing loans, regulatory outreach are also issues. And reviving that growth is going to take a huge political effort, and everybody's wondering where that's going to come from. We're happy to dispense tips and for success. Coming over here when you can, and working with trusted distributors. How do you know they're trusted? Well, you can contact me in my office. We can vet them for you. We can tell you if they're real. We can tell you if they've been in business. We can tell you how many employees they have, etc. And of course, India is huge. If you're thinking about starting an office here or a distributor, one is not going to be enough. Think of the EU, and would you hire one distributor in Ireland to handle Spain and the Czech Republic and all of those together? Probably not. You would look at different ones in different cities, and there's lots of cities here. We can help you, determine what the best place to locate and the best strategy. Focus on the long term, of course. It's a cost to actually focus on the long term. We realize that. That's why we say it's not the first place you should come. It's someplace that you should have a strategy and be able to, stay for the long term. So price, partners, patience, and persistence are all things you're going to need here. I did mention that we did have a Patent and Trademark Office officer here. His name's John Quebeca. And believe me, use him as you can, because there aren't many around the world, and this is one place you're really going to need to be able to talk to an expert like this. And that wraps up my formal remarks, and I'm happy to turn it back over to Miles. We can have a round of Q&A, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much, Greg, for that overview. And now we'll go ahead and I'll pass it over to Courtney to lead our Q&A session.
At this time, for questions from the phone line, you will need to press star followed by the number 1. Please unmute your line and record your name clearly as prompted. That is questions from the phone line. It is star followed by the number 1.
Courtney, unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes. No.
Yep, now we can.
Yes. Oh, great. I'm so sorry. Greg, so in Utah, we have a lot of suppliers in aerospace that supply aircraft parts here. We also make a lot of legacy aircraft parts here and do reverse engineering, which seems like from your presentation is a need. How do our Utah aerospace companies get involved in these important supplier relationships?
Well, I mean, they can start with Shelby in our office in Salt Lake City. She can connect them to me and the specialists in our office. You know, we're not just Americans here trying to figure out the market. We have a full complement of locally employed staff. They tend to stay for years and become experts in their field. We have an excellent specialist in aerospace and defense named Nisha, and Nisha would be happy to take those companies through the steps of getting connected, and she's actually always on the watch for projects in this area, and if she can get connected to them, she'll always be able to reach out and say, how about, are you interested in this kind of project? So
great.
By all means.
Also, I know you'd mentioned the U.S. Trade and Development Agency doing sort of a reverse study and potentially coming on a reverse trade mission here. Because we have so many companies like that, would they ever consider coming to Utah to do something like that, since that the aerospace and defense field is so large here?
Yeah, I think it's something that we can broach with the USTDA. They're always looking for ideas on what to fund and what the impact of that could be. So this is, we can sort of pool our resources here and come up with a great proposal. It sounds like something we can do.
Terrific. Thank you. We have several callers that are in the nutraceutical business here in Utah, which is large. Young Living, USANA, Nu Skin, doTERRA. And our understanding is that India used to have a very prohibitive process for registering in the 29 Indian states that made it virtually impossible to do business there. But now that has changed, there's one uniform approval process. One, is there still a large opportunity for nutraceuticals there? And two, if so, what would you suggest for them to start getting going in that process? Yes, that's my question.
Nutraceuticals is a big market here. American products are well regarded and sought after. the niche product in the nutraceutical area sort of has a corollary in India where there's a market that is sort of naturally receptive to it. It's a little hard to explain, but there's what they call the Ayurvedic medicine and products here and there's a real following there, and it's all about natural products, organic products, beauty products that follow this regimen, and because of that, I think there is sort of a natural affinity for these nutraceuticals from the United States. I would definitely urge those companies to get in contact with us. We have an excellent specialist that's been with us for years. Her name's Smita. She's in our office in Mumbai, who can take them through the steps of how to get connected here and what to do next. Of course, they can always talk to Shelby as well.
Great. Thank you so much. Another question about energy. We understand that there are about 2 to 3 brownouts a day in India. Obviously, that drop in voltage can really ruin your equipment. What sort of investment from energy companies, if any, is the Indian government looking for to help with this problem, if at all?
This is part of their plan. They realize that they have an issue, and they are putting their money where their mouth is. They're investing in distribution equipment, smart meters, substations. I see it going in around my house, actually, putting in new cabling, new electrical cables underground. And so I think things are in motion. And if a company has that kind of product, they should definitely contact us.
Okay, terrific. I wonder if we should wrap up. Miles, do you think we should wrap up or should we keep going? Can I do one more question?
Why don't you go ahead and do one more question, and then would really encourage everybody who's listening in, if there's anything we didn't capture today, Shelby and Greg can be available to follow up on a one-on-one basis, particularly on some of the services they can provide. And then also, please let us know what you'd like us to focus on over the next 2 webinars, and we can make sure we dig into any other issues then.
Terrific. And I will mention, I know that several people had written in about manufacturing questions, and our 3rd session on July 8th will be focusing on supply chain, but specifically it will be focusing a lot on manufacturing and IT in India. So I don't want you to feel that your questions are ignored, but they will be specifically addressed at that time. I do want to focus, if I could briefly, on education. I know that there's a big demand there, and you'd mentioned that's temporarily on hold, but we have a lot of educational institutions here that are interested in investing overseas, their infrastructure. What opportunities are there for higher education institutions to participate in helping with this demand, if at all, since you said that was put on hold temporarily with COVID?
I think it's more than just COVID. I think the Indians are a bit worried about the Trump administration. It's sort of the talk about restricting visas, even though things haven't changed considerably, it's sort of dampening the market. And we don't know exactly what the end game of that's going to be. We try to overcome it by encouraging Indian students to, investigate the United States and, disregard the rhetoric that's going on. But that certainly has had a dampening effect along with COVID. We hope that, both of those things will get on track, very soon.
Terrific. So I will, first of all, Greg, thank you so much. And Shelby, we are so grateful. That was an excellent presentation and so thorough. I do just want to remind everyone that we have 2 more lectures in our webinars in our series. The next one is July 8th, also at 8:30. Doing business in India, and it's really from the Indian perspective. We're going to have top business and government leaders addressing your questions from their perspective, and it will really be an excellent opportunity. And one of the speakers is actually, it's his job to bring outside companies, overseas companies to India to invest in them and be there. So I think that's a great opportunity to really get your questions answered. And on Wednesday, July 8th, we also have, we'll be discussing supply chain with Dizan Shira and really setting up your operations overseas, which is an important thing to look at optimizing your production and distribution. They'll also specifically be talking about manufacturing and IT as well as other issues, but I know that was a big, a lot of questions were based around that, so I want to make sure that that will be specifically addressed and let you know that that will be covered. So thank you so much, all of you, for participating, and Greg, that was terrific. Thank you.